The distress call, the stars above the mining colony flickered with a strange light, and for a moment everyone thought it was only the reflection of the system's twin suns. But then the light grew sharper, redder, and a soundless tremor passed through the sky. People ran to the open fields, their eyes wide, their voices filled with fear, because they all knew what that light meant. The enemy had come again. The alien fleets had been tearing through frontier worlds for months. No one could stop them, not the Council, not the Allied empires. And now the colony of Varanfor stood in their path. In the control tower, a man named David leaned over the console. His hand shaking, he was only a signal officer, trained to listen, to monitor the skies. But tonight the responsibility of millions fell on him. He had one job: send the call. His voice cracked as he pressed the transmitter. To anyone who hears this, we are under attack. The enemy is here. We cannot hold. Please, please help us. The message burst into space. A wave of desperate sound carried on beams of light. But David knew the truth. Help would not come from the Council. They were too slow, too divided. They had argued for months instead of acting, and so, almost without hope, he added words that most would not dare. If humans can hear this, if Earth still remembers the stars, we beg you, answer us. There was silence after the broadcast, only the low hum of the failing shields. The enemy ships already appeared as dark dots moving in formation. Like predators circling wounded prey, the colony militia scrambled fighters. But their machines were old, outdated. The best pilots knew they were flying into death. Still they rose, wings of fire against the darkness. In the shelters below, families huddled. Mothers covered children's ears. Fathers held shaking hands. Everyone whispered the same thing: no one will come, no one ever does. But in the deep black between galaxies, the message traveled. Through empty voids and ancient relay points. Through forgotten networks once thought dead. Until finally it reached the one place that would answer. A listening post orbiting a silent world blinked alive. Human soldiers looked at each other, their screens filling with the desperate call. There was no debate, no delay. A commander stood and gave only 2 words. We move. Within hours, the human dreadnoughts awoke. Massive ships built not for defense, but for war. Their hulls carried scars from battles long past. Their cannons were old but terrible. Weapons designed with one purpose: to end threats. Inside the flagship, Captain Mark stood before the star map. The enemy formation glowed in red. The colony signal pulsed weakly. He did not smile. He did not frown. He only whispered, "They asked." We answer, for humanity had not forgotten. Once, long ago, they had been mocked as a death world species. Too violent, too unstable, too dangerous. The Council had exiled them to the edges of the galaxy. But humanity had survived. And in the shadows they had built weapons that no one wanted to see again. Now, as the dreadnoughts set their course, the stars seemed to tremble. Back on the colony, David sat at his console, listening to static, his eyes hollow. The shields were failing. Explosions echoed above. The militia was dying. Hope was gone. Then a signal cracked through. Sharp, cold, human, Colony Varanfor. This is Terran Command. Your call was received. Hold position, repeat, hold position. We are inbound. David's mouth went dry. His hands froze, the room fell silent. The officers stared at each other, and for the first time that night, a spark of hope lit their faces above the planet. The enemy fleet tightened its grip. Their ships preparing for the final strike, they believed victory was certain. They had no idea what was coming because humanity had answered. And humanity's answer was never mercy. The black of space shivered as massive human dreadnoughts tore through hyperspace, their engines howling like ancient beasts, their shadows stretching across stars, their weapons already alive. To the desperate colony below, the sight was unreal. Gigantic war machines of human design arriving like gods. And with them came the promise of one thing: total destruction. The first clash, the alien fleet moved closer, their dark ships forming a net around the colony. Their commanders had fought this battle many times before. It was routine for them, a slow crushing of weak defenses. Another world to burn, another people to enslave. On the colony surface, the last of the militia fighters lifted into the night sky, their engines coughing, their weapons small. They knew they could not win, but they refused to run. One pilot whispered into the calm, "If we die, at least let the children live a little longer." The others answered only with silence. The alien ships opened fire. Beams of white light cut across the black. The militia fighters scattered like sparks. Some were destroyed instantly. Others fought back with tiny missiles that barely scratched enemy shields. The colony shields flickered red, breaking under each strike. But then, the stars themselves seemed to tear open. A ripple of darkness bent the void. And from it emerged the first human dreadnought, its hull black as iron, its cannons glowing with restrained fury. Behind it came another and another, until the sky above Varan 4 was filled with giants. The alien fleet paused, their formation hesitating. For a moment, their commanders stared at the readings. Confused, they had not seen such ships in centuries. They thought humans were scattered, weak, gone. But now those old nightmares had returned. The human flagship broadcast one simple warning. Its voice flat, cold, merciless. This world is under Terran protection. Withdraw or be destroyed, the alien commander laughed, his scaled mouth showing rows of teeth. Humans, he hissed to his crew. Extinct wolves trying to growl. Crush them, his fleet advanced. Beams of energy streaked toward the dreadnoughts. But the human ships did not move. Their shields absorbed the fire like rain on steel. Then, with a low vibration that shook the very air, they answered. The first volley from the dreadnoughts was not beams, not small missiles, but planet-killer cannons designed for one purpose. Obliteration. Enormous spheres of white-hot plasma roared forward. Crossing the void in seconds, the alien ships had no time to dodge. The first row of their formation vanished in fire, their hulls ripped apart like paper. Explosions chained across the fleet, fragments burning into the black. On the colony surface, people stared upward in awe. The night sky lit as if by 100 suns, the human dreadnoughts firing again and again. Each shot like a god's hammer, each impact a promise of total destruction. David in the control tower gripped his console, his voice trembling. They came! The humans really came! Officers around him cried openly. Not from fear, but from the sheer sight of salvation. The alien commander roared in fury, ordering his fleet to scatter, but it was too late. Dreadnoughts were built for wars where no second chance existed. Their targeting systems locked onto every enemy ship at once, their weapons cycling without pause. Smaller human escort ships broke formation, hunting survivors, their cannons tearing through fighters and frigates like dry leaves in a storm. Inside the flagship, Captain Mark stood unmoving, his voice calm as he gave the order. No survivors. His crew obeyed without hesitation. To them, this was not war. This was justice. For years, humanity had watched from the shadows, forced into exile, mocked as monsters. But now, with one desperate call, they returned, and they would remind the galaxy why humans were once feared. In less than 1 hour, half the alien fleet was gone, their proud armada shattered, debris burning in orbit. Screams of commanders lost in the static, yet even in their destruction, the aliens refused to retreat. Pride drove them forward. Desperate to prove they could defeat Deathworlders, they rallied what ships remained and surged at the human line. The clash shook the void, dreadnoughts at the front firing full broadsides, alien ships exploding under waves of fire, the colony below trembling from the shock. Still, the humans did not fall back. They pressed forward, pushing into the heart of the alien fleet, their dreadnoughts forming a wall of annihilation, every blast carving paths through enemies. Every strike a lesson in terror on Varan 4. Families emerged from shelters, tears on their faces. They looked at the sky now filled with burning wrecks. And for the first time, they whispered not of fear, but of awe. The humans answered. But as the battle raged, deep within the alien flagship, their commander glared at the screen. His rage turning to fear, he realized too late what was coming. Humans were not here to protect, they were here to erase. And in the silence between cannon fire, he understood a truth older than any council law when humans came to war. They did not stop halfway, they finished it. The colony had begged for salvation, and salvation had come dressed in fire. The message in fire, the burning wrecks of alien ships drifted above Varan 4. Glowing like shattered stars, the people on the colony stood outside their shelters. Watching in silence, the night sky was no longer dark. It was alive with fire, but inside the human flagship, the battle was far from over. Captain Mark studied the red icons still moving on the star map. Dozens of alien warships remained, Damaged but not broken, they fought on with blind fury. Unwilling to admit defeat, his second officer spoke. "Commander, enemy fleet refuses to retreat. They are regrouping." Mark's eyes narrowed, his voice low. "Good, then let them gather. We will show them what happens when you stand against us." The dreadnoughts adjusted formation, their black hulls shifting into a crescent wall. Behind them, smaller escort ships spread wide, forming a deadly net. The humans were not only fighting, they were trapping. The alien commander shouted across his bridge, claws digging into the armrest of his throne. "Push forward, their numbers are fewer than ours. If we break their center, we win," his crew obeyed. But fear gnawed at their eyes, for every blast they sent was swallowed by human shields, and every return volley from the dreadnoughts tore their lines apart. The battle became slaughter. Each alien ship that tried to charge was ripped open, their cries lost in the void. One after another vanished in a storm of fire. Yet Captain Mark was not satisfied. He leaned closer to the map and gave the order that chilled even his own crew. "Target their communication ships, silence them. No distress calls leave this system." Within minutes, alien comm relays burst into flames, their signals cut off. The galaxy beyond would hear nothing. No warnings, no cries for help, only silence. On the colony surface, David in the control tower listened to the human transmissions, his hands shaking again, but this time not from fear, from awe. "They're not just saving us," he whispered. "They're sending a message." One officer beside him frowned. "What message?" David swallowed hard, staring at the sky. "That humanity is back, and nothing will stop them in the shelters below." Families slowly came out into the open air. Children pointed at the massive black ships above, their eyes wide, their voices trembling. "Are those really humans?" Mothers nodded slowly. Fathers stared upward with both fear and gratitude, because they all knew the old stories, stories of humanity's wars, stories that had been buried by the Council, the aliens, once so proud, now screamed in desperation, their fleet shrinking, their commanders begging each other for support. But no support came. The trap was closing. The dreadnoughts advanced step by step, their engines glowing, their cannons never resting. Inside the alien flagship, the commander's scales shivered with cold dread. He whispered to himself, "This is not a battle. This is execution," and he was right. Above Varan 4, the final stage began. Human dreadnoughts surrounded the remaining fleet, forming a circle of iron and flame. The aliens were locked in, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Captain Mark spoke into the open channel, his words cold as steel. To the fleet of the aggressor, "Your crimes are recorded, your death is certain. Let the galaxy witness what happens when you prey on the desperate." Then he gave the final order. "Fire all batteries." What followed was not war, it was annihilation. Thousands of cannons unleashed at once. The void filled with light so bright it blinded sensors. Alien ships exploded in chains, entire formations gone in seconds, their wreckage raining down in burning pieces. The colony shook under the fury. Windows shattered, alarms screamed. Yet the people did not hide. They stood in the open, watching in awe as their enemies were erased. David gripped the console, his voice almost a whisper. "They're destroying everything, leaving nothing behind." And deep in his heart, he knew this was more than rescue. This was a declaration. Humanity had returned not as allies, not as negotiators, but as executioners. The Council would not be able to ignore this. Every empire would hear, every world would remember. Because humans did not just save Varan 4. They turned the battlefield into a warning written in fire across the stars. As the last alien ship shattered, silence fell over the system, broken only by the hum of human dreadnoughts drifting like black mountains in the void. Their cannons cooling, their shadows stretching long. Captain Mark turned from the star map, his face unreadable, his voice steady. "Prepare the message. Let every world know this is only the beginning, and somewhere, in the depths of the galaxy, leaders and emperors would soon look up from their thrones, fear crawling into their bones because they would realize what the desperate already knew. When humanity answers, the galaxy burns. The Council trembles far from Varan 4. In the shining chambers of the Galactic Council, the great leaders of dozens of species sat in unease. The news had not yet reached them through official channels. Their comm relays reported silence from the frontier, but whispers moved faster than light. Rumors of firestorms, rumors of human warships, rumors of an entire fleet erased in a single night. The council chamber was a place of polished marble and gold, banners of ancient empires hanging heavy, yet today the air was tense. Claws tapped against tables, tentacles curled, wings shifted, voices muttered. The council speaker raised his hand, his voice sharp. "Order! We will discuss the reports, though unconfirmed. They suggest human intervention on Varan 4. Immediately the chamber exploded with noise. Some shouted in disbelief, others hissed in fear. A few even laughed nervously. Humans? Impossible. They were banished, their fleets dismantled centuries ago. But one counselor, old and scarred, slammed his fist. "I fought them once long ago. Do not think they are gone. Humans do not fade. They wait." A silence spread, his words heavy, because deep inside, many remembered the old stories, the wars where humans fought until nothing remained. The reason they were exiled in the first place, humanity had been too dangerous, too uncontrollable then, as if to answer their doubts. The chamber screens lit up, an intercepted transmission replayed. The voice of Captain Mark echoed cold and steady. "To the fleet of the aggressor, your crimes are recorded, your death is certain. Let the galaxy witness what happens when you prey on the desperate." The counselors froze. Their blood ran cold because this was not rumor. This was proof. One leader whispered, "They have returned!" Another hissed, "And they brought destruction with them." Panic spread through the chamber. Debates turned to shouting. "We must contact them." "No! We must prepare fleets. Seal the borders. If they attack again, who will stop them?" The speaker slammed his staff. "Silence," his voice echoed. "This is exactly what we feared." The humans hid in their exile, rebuilding in secret. "Now they strike with ancient weapons," a younger counselor asked, trembling. "But why Varan 4? Why save that colony?" The old scarred one leaned forward, his eyes grim. "Because someone called for help, and humans always answer calls, but never gently. They save with fire, not with mercy. Back on Varan 4, the colony tried to recover. Smoke still rose from destroyed militia hangars. Families searched for survivors, but their eyes always turned upward, to the massive black dreadnoughts that still hung in the sky. David remained in the control tower, listening to the last transmissions. His heart heavy, though they were saved, he wondered what price the galaxy would now pay. Children cheered when human supply drops fell from orbit. Crates of medicine, food, tools, gifts from the dreadnoughts, but parents exchanged nervous looks, because they understood these gifts came with shadows inside the flagship. Captain Mark stood silent as his officers prepared the next jump. He looked at the planet one last time, his voice calm. "They will live. They will remember who saved them. But more important, others will hear. Others will fear," his second officer asked quietly. "And if the council moves against us?" Mark's eyes darkened. "Then the council will burn too in the deep void." The dreadnoughts vanished one by one, slipping back into hyperspace, leaving behind only wreckage and a colony that would never forget. And in the council chamber, leaders argued into the night, their voices trembling, because for the first time in centuries, the balance of the galaxy had shifted. No longer was the council's word law. No longer did empires hold the strongest fleets. Now everyone knew, somewhere in the darkness, humanity was waiting, armed and merciless. And one truth settled heavy in their hearts. If humans returned, they would not return as servants or allies. They would return as judges. And the sentence they carried was always the same: total destruction. The cost of calling, the wreckage of the alien fleet still drifted above Varan 4, silent and broken, twisted metal glowing faintly as it burned in the planet's orbit. The colony below tried to return to life, but nothing would ever be the same. Children played again in the streets. Yet their games were different now. They no longer pretended to be militia pilots. They pretended to be human dreadnoughts, roaring in deep voices, destroying enemies with sweeping arms. Parents watched in silence, fear and gratitude mixing in their eyes in the control tower. David sat staring at the empty stars where the dreadnoughts had vanished. His console filled with fragments of human transmissions, his voice low as he whispered to himself, "We called for help and they came. But will they always come like this?" Across the galaxy, news spread faster than light. Not through official channels, but through whispers. Smugglers, soldiers, refugees, they all carried the same story. Humans had returned, and they brought total destruction in markets and ports. People spoke with lowered voices. "Did you hear?" A whole fleet erased. Not a single enemy left. The humans do not fight wars. They end them. Fear spread in empires that once mocked Earth. Some leaders ordered fleets to prepare. Others tried to erase the rumors, but the truth was too large to hide. Every world was now asking the same question. What if humans came for us? In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, panic had turned to silence. Leaders no longer shouted, they whispered, each of them knowing that no army could stand against dreadnoughts like those. One counselor finally spoke the thought on all their minds. We did not banish them. We created them. On Varan 4, life was fragile. Families buried the militia pilots who had fallen. They built a monument of stone. But when they tried to carve the names of the heroes, someone added another line at the top, not a name, but a single word, humanity. Because it was not just the colony that had survived, it was the idea that somewhere, in the dark, humans were watching, waiting, and if you begged loud enough, they would answer. In the quiet of night, David walked through the ruined militia hangars. The smell of smoke still strong, his eyes turned upward again. He thought of the last human message that had played across his console. A voice deep and unfeeling. This is only the beginning. He wondered what it meant. Would humanity rise again to rule the stars? Or would they remain shadows, striking only when called? Either way, the galaxy would never forget this night. In the depths of hyperspace, aboard the human flagship, Captain Mark stood at the observation window, watching the stars streak by. His crew silent around him, he spoke quietly. But his words carried to all, "The Council will fear us. The empires will whisper, 'Good, let them.' Fear is a stronger wall than any shield." His officers nodded. None questioned him, for they all knew the truth. Humanity had not returned to make peace. They had returned to remind the galaxy of what they were. Deathworlders, destroyers, executioners. And in their silence, in their exile, they had learned one lesson well when they came. They would not come to fight for balance or treaties. They would come to end wars before they began, even if it meant turning whole fleets into dust back on Varan 4. David stood with the colony children near the half-finished monument. One child looked up at him, her voice small. "Mister, will the humans come back?" David paused, the weight of the stars heavy in his chest. Finally, he said, "They will come if we call, but you must understand, when humans come, they bring fire." The child did not understand. She only smiled, but David turned his eyes to the sky, and in his heart he knew the truth. They had been desperate. They had begged for salvation, and humanity had answered, but salvation had a price. The price was fear. The price was destruction. The price was a galaxy trembling in the dark. And though Varan 4 had been saved, though its people still breathed, every star beyond now carried a whisper, a warning etched into memory. When humanity answers, it is never mercy. It is fire. And in that fire, the galaxy would either bow or burn.